a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello BookTube, I'm Sean the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel. Here I am with another book review, this one of Barbara Pym's final novel, Quartet in Autumn, published in 1977. When I say it's her final novel, it's the one that she wrote near the end of her life. She was constantly revising drafts of earlier novels, which were published later than Quartet in Autumn, but the way I see it, Quartet in Autumn was her last novel. And I just finished reading it a day or so ago, and I wanted to tell you a little bit about it and my impressions while those impressions were still fresh. I have been reading for about a year and a half. I've been reading Barbara Pym's novels in sequence, so I've now reached the end, except for the ones that were published in the remaining 3 years of her life and then posthumously, and again that were had been started decades earlier in many cases, and I look forward to reading those. But wow, what a cap to a career that was begun with the publication of Some Tame Gazelle in 1950. I found Quartet in Autumn to be almost unrelentingly, overpoweringly bleak and depressing, as it's about two men and two women to make up the quartet of the novel, who are weeks or a year perhaps away from retirement, and they have been working together in the same office doing nondescript work which does not seem to be valued by the powers that be in the office and is never really explained to the reader. All of Barbara Pym's earlier novels were about either young or middle-aged characters, and as this was written when she herself was in her 60s, about people the same age as her, the tone of the novel is much less hilarious, although there is still some wonderful humor, which apparently you see more of it each time you reread it, so I look forward to that. But I certainly did find some really dark gallows humor in the novel, but almost none of the animated, whimsical sparkle of her earlier novels. And the best way to show that is to talk about one of the central idiosyncrasies of not only Barbara Pym's fiction, but of her life. She and her characters stalk people. And I don't mean in the really disturbing way, although, other people may have a different opinion, but Barbara Pym used to follow men around all over town since she was a young woman. And eventually she might finagle an introduction and date them or whatever, but she would just follow guys and go to the library and look stuff up about them, and that is replicated in her fiction, especially No Fond Return of Love. So the other thing to say, and this is going to just coming out spontaneously without any organization, that the publication of Quartet in Autumn in 1977 marked the reemergence of Barbara Pym out of the literary wilderness where she was cast after the No Fond Return of Love. No Fond Return of Love was published in 1961, and then Pym's next novel was rejected by her publisher, I believe in 1962, and her publisher, Jonathan Cape, said, "Sorry, your stories and your writing style is passé. Please go away." And she just disappeared from the literary scene, still writing, working on her novels, but nothing was published until Quartet in Autumn. But No Fond Return of Love, one of the central dramas of the piece is that the two main characters just are following their men around and stalking them and going looking them up. And Barbara Pym was like that, and it's one of the joys of her novels. So to have that same modus operandi in Quartet of Autumn, but in such a way with all of the sparkle gone. So, for example, one of the women has had a mastectomy, and she stalks her doctor, who she was attracted to. and just goes and stands outside his house. There's no joy, it's just kind of a sad scene. And actually, that same female character, after her retirement, one of the men of the quartet comes and stands out her house once or twice and does not have the interpersonal skills or internal fortitude to actually go and knock on her door. And she sees him and pretends not to see him and is angry at him meddling. And to have that most joyous, quirky aspect of what animated Barbara Pym in her own life and in her novels to show up in such literally pathetic, gut-wrenchingly interpersonally impoverished way just about broke my heart. So I really struggled through much of this novel, and I'm not going to say any more about what happens other than to share one quote, which is about one of the men, and the men are just useless. I think men are usually useless in Barbara Pym's novels. She's very realistic that way. But this is Norman, and Norman, like the two women, Norman has never been married. Only Edwin is a widower. But Norman is visiting his brother-in-law, who he doesn't give a damn about, but he feels obligated to go visit in the hospital. His brother-in-law's Ken. And this scene just shows the way that Pym's wry humor is married to this autumnal, morose sensibility of this novel. They sat almost in silence, and it was a relief to both of them when the bell went and the visit was at an end. "Everything all right?" Norman asked, now eagerly on his feet. "The tea's too strong." "Oh." Norman was nonplussed, as if he could do anything about a thing like that. What did Ken expect? "Couldn't you ask Sister or one of the nurses to make it weaker or put more milk in it?" "You'd still taste the strength even so. It's strong to begin with, you see. Anyway, I couldn't ask Sister or one of the nurses. It's not their job." "Well, the lady that makes the tea, then." "Catch me doing that," said Ken obscurely. "But strong tea's the last thing I should have with my complaint." Norman shook himself like a tetchy little dog. He hadn't come here to be involved in this sort of thing, and he allowed himself to be hustled away by a bossy Irish nurse, with never a backward glance at the patient in the bed. So crankiness, disconnectedness, being around people with no depth of connection, even though this is about Norman and his brother-in-law, the sense of disconnection in that scene characterizes the relationship between the quartet of the four characters through much of the novel, and it is really a despondent feeling about growing old, facing retirement, facing illness, facing mortality, and to just be completely and utterly alone and seemingly unable to connect. And getting your shirt in a knot about the damnedest things. I'm not going to go into detail because it is one of the, in a really blackly humorous way, one of the delightful things in the novel is that one of the women is upset with the other woman because of a mismatched milk bottle, and she just cannot let go of her resentment. And it actually plays itself out in the novel, and that is just typical Pymmian humor infused with embalming fluid. I mean, it's just so I really thought I was going to end up not enjoying this novel, Quartet in Autumn, as much as all of her previous novels, which were all 5-star reads. And I'm not going to say anything about the ending, but the ending is so pitch perfect, so perfectly Pymmian, that it gave a realistic glimmer of something to warm my broken heart about these people, that there were still choices and possibilities in their future. It was perfect. So I recommend, don't start, if you have never read a Barbara Pym novel, don't start with this one, but do get to this one after. The three that are my favorite so far are Some Tame Gazelle, her debut, A Glass of Blessings, and No Fond Return of Love. So start with one of those. Other people really liked Excellent Women. I did too. They've all been 5-star reads, but those are my three favorites. And then eventually get to Quartet in Autumn. I think it's a good place to finish with Barbara Pym. She has achieved something that is a departure from her earlier novels, but is also a novel of hard-won, completely unsentimental compassion for her characters, and I recommend it to you heartily. And just watch your milk bottles, alright? Especially once you get close to retirement, because all hell might break loose. I love Barbara Pym. This novel deepened my love for her and her writing, and made me really work hard, because this is a spare, stripped down, completely unsentimental novel that put me as a reader through the paces and really withheld a lot of the hilarity that animated her earlier novels, and got me to that perfect Pymmian sweet spot where I was left with a sense of hard-won joy. Thanks for watching.